Welcome to Drew Theological School. Being a theological student is not easy, as Leah Booth is about to find out, as she wrestles with the issues of King David and what he would do in our modern times.
Context means everything. How am I supposed to know anything about what David would do in the modern world? I wish I could just get done with this. Oh, I fell asleep. I can't believe it. I really have to get back to this project. Who are you?
Hi, Leah.
Hi. Who are you?
Call me David.
David. Hi, David. David what?
King David. Sound familiar?
Okay.
That David.
Hi, King David. I don't know if you know this about yourself. You're dead.
Oh, that was harsh. What do you believe, Leah?
About?
Faith, death. What do you study?
Well, I'm studying to be a pastor, so I guess I believe in life after death.
Well, a pastor, I guess a Christian pastor.
A Christian pastor.
You Christians. Well, if you believe in God and you're a Christian God especially, you should know that death doesn't hinder God's purpose or doesn't hinder what God says.
Okay. Well, I haven't experienced resurrection in my own life yet in this way.
You should be familiar with Saul's story.
That's true, I am.
Called Samuel from the grave.
He did.
So why can't I be here?
I don't know. You're right. Yep. Well, since you're here,
Sure.
Could I ask you some questions? I'm working on a project all about you.
Talk to me.
Well, my project is on 3 things.
Mm-hmm.
They might be a little touchy, but your kingship, your time as king, is that all right? The rape of Tamar, your daughter, and also your relationship with Samuel, is that all right?
Shoot, I'm ready.
Okay. Well, can you tell me about what it was like to be the king of Israel?
King of Israel. How can I put this? I never really wanted to be king. I was just fine in the backyard, out in the fields, taking care of sheep. And here it is. One day, it was a strange day. I'm just taking care of sheep and doing what I'm supposed to do. And there was commotion around the house. I heard it. I heard my brothers getting all dressed and getting ready to go to the front because we had a guest, but they never really told me about anything. They all just got dressed and went to the front, and I was just still taking care of sheep. And all of a sudden, they called for me. So I'm thinking they must want something. I had to go run an errand, no big deal. And here it is, Samuel. And he looked at me, and he just had this look in his eyes, and he said, I'm the one. The one what? I don't know. And then he anointed me to be king. And let's just say from that day forth, my life was over. It was the beginning of my end. But I never wanted to be king.
Can you tell me about the wars you fought, the politics?
Wars? I fought too many wars to even number them in. It was just the way of the times. I just had to protect Israel from all the outside threats. I had to protect Israel from itself, and I had to protect Israel from outside influences.
So, what do you think about our modern situation? Do you know our modern situation? Do you think we're going to war?
I'm very familiar with your modern situation, and as far as you going to war, you're already at war.
Like the war you sent Uriah to die in?
Listen, we're not gonna touch the Uriah situation while you're facing your own wars every day.
U.S. spy planes have been intercepted while approaching Russian airspace over the Black Sea.
The Americans have confirmed that an incident took place, and they, as tradition dictates now, blame the Russians.
Your modern day leader, your president, kind of reminds me about Saul. Saul was very into himself, very narcissistic. And anybody that's so into themselves as a leader, you should be very concerned. And the thing about Saul is, as I watched him rule as king over Israel, is that he had bitter war all of his days. And that's the same thing I fear for your leader. He will have bitter war all of his days because of his influence.
The U.S. Air Force dropped a 21,000-pound bomb in eastern Afghanistan, the first use ever of this weapon in combat. This is a weapon called the Massive Ordnance Air Blast Bomb.
Well, you just said you fought many wars, but
Yes.
let's move on. Now I'm interested in talking about Uriah. What about Bathsheba? You sent him to die.
Oh, this is touchy, isn't it? You don't know what you're talking about. Uriah was a soldier. That's what he was supposed to do. He fought wars. What's Bathsheba got to do with this?
She was his wife.
Bathsheba was all alone. I know about your modern world. Yes, he was fighting a war. But when he came back home, I sent him home. Especially to go wash his feet. Do you know what that means?
I'm familiar with your euphemisms, yeah.
Okay, if you're a fuel student, you should definitely know.
That's right.
So he'd rather stay at the gates and worry about the field and the men in the ark, kind of like your modern world. All of your clergy getting tons of divorces because they'd rather take care of the church and the ark and the presence of God.
I was totally out of balance, still am, as it relates to preaching. And I ruined my marriage in the name of God because she was oftentimes upset. We argued every time I had to leave. And I was the last person who was picked up at the airport when I got back.
Leaving Bathsheba to fend for herself. He deserved to die. But that's what kings do. I gave Uriah an honorable death. And you have to understand, Bathsheba was no normal woman. I watched her. She was just amazing. And Uriah really didn't deserve her. Yes, I know it was wrong and that was her husband, but she was amazing. And what kind of man would rather be out in an open field because his men are out in the open field? Like, that comforts them. Go take care of your wife. But he'd rather sleep at the gates and mourn and
I said, well, I was a preacher when you met me. So how in the world, if the doors are opening, you will not allow me to go, and we have to have these vicious debates when I'm going to do what God has called me to do? But what I failed to understand was she did not marry a profession. She married a person. And so now my word to anybody who wants to take from this lesson is that each preacher must understand the significance of ministering to his own wife. And a wife, a pastor's wife, should never ever feel like she's got to compete with the church or the ministry for her husband's affection and attention.
Take your point, I guess.
What can you guess? You have to understand. I mean, why would any man want to be outside and he you could be enwrapped in the warmth of that sheet.
Yeah, but you were judged for what you did. You lost your first child with her.
What do you mean I lost my first child? I didn't lose the child. Yahweh took the child. I never got it. It's not the child's fault. Why should a child have to pay for my mistake? But that's your God.
All right, but we can move on now. How was it to be a king with Samuel around?
Samuel. The thing about Samuel, I don't think Samuel ever got over Saul not being king anymore. And as a prophet, I know he spoke what God said, but I always felt like Samuel had his own agenda. You know the story very well. You got all these books here. When Samuel came and anointed me king, I was very conflicted. How could I be king and there's already a reigning king? And I made a lot of mistakes because becoming king doesn't come with an instruction manual. God calls you, gets anointed by a prophet, whatever. And here it is. I'm always having to fight what God is saying to me and what the prophet is saying. So I always felt like Samuel had lost his power and was using me as a pawn to get his agenda done in the name of God.
Interesting politics. You were anointed king while Saul was still the king. Why didn't you just kill him?
Well, I'd done a lot of killing in my day. And I just really had a high regard and respect for Saul. It was about leadership. And I was always afraid the same thing that befall Saul would happen to me. If I lived by the sword, I'd die by the sword. So I was always afraid if I became king by killing a king, I'll get killed as a king, if you understand what I'm saying.
I think I do. Well, that wasn't the only violent episode of your life. What can you tell me what happened with Tamar?
I was a king. I was a warrior. I was a musician. I wasn't a prophet. I wasn't a seer. How was I supposed to know that was going to happen? She was my daughter. Amnon was my son. How was I ever supposed to know he'd do such a thing? But it's like Tamar said, these things simply weren't done in all of Israel.
Well, so why didn't you do anything to punish Amnon at the time?
How could I? How could I? When I looked at Amnon, he had the same look in his eyes when he looked at Tamar that I did with Bathsheba. But I never thought he'd do that to his own sister. I was just being a father, which I felt I failed at. And how could I punish him? I was guilty of the same thing to some extent. It's something that Nathan made me familiar of. Good old prophet Nathan. That day when he gave me that, what you call a parable about a rich man, and I realized that I was the rich man taken from the poor, I just really was never the same. So how could I punish Amnon for the same thing I was guilty of? But it's something your country should be very familiar with. You know, you punish people for the same crimes that the country's guilty of, but who am I to say anything?
USA! USA! Knock the crap out of him, would you? Seriously. Get him out of here. In the good old days, this doesn't happen because they used to treat them very, very rough. And when they protested once, you know, they would not do it again so easily. I'd like to punch him in the face, I'll tell you. I love the old days. You know what they used to do to guys like that when they were in a place like this? They'd be carried out on a stretcher, folks. That's true.
You really are familiar with our justice and political systems.
Yeah, let's just say I'm I'm very familiar with your fake news and alternative facts.
Sean Spicer, our press secretary, gave alternative facts to that.
Look, alternative facts are not facts. They're falsehoods.
Your daughter had been raped by her own brother, by your son. So doesn't letting him off send a wrong signal to your kingdom about how to treat women?
You're addressing this issue of patriarchy, aren't you?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not saying it's right, but that's just the way things were done. Women were used as pawns. And even till this day in your own political system, women are used as pawns. You know, you're Bill Clinton, and I did not have sexual relations with that woman. And even your modern day one with grabbing by the feeling. So.
I don't think that's the euphemism he used, but I take your point.
Yeah, it's just, Tamar was a pawn. Not for me, but for Absalom. I couldn't do anything about it. I lost 3 children that day.
3?
See, Tamar left the kingdom that day. That's one gone. Amnon never had peace until Absalom killed him. And here it is. I have Absalom killing his own brother and my son and seeking to overrule my throne. So don't think of Absalom as this great hero of trying to stand up for his sister and save her. He reminded me very much of myself. He was very strategic. And again, I saw the lust in his eyes for power because everybody wanted power. Everybody. To sit on the throne. Have your ring kissed. So Absalom used his own sister as a pawn for his insurrection. You're familiar with this term.
Will make America great again.
Yeah. So Absalom had this thing about make Israel great again. He turned the people against me and he used Tamar to do it. Yeah, he started sending this submersed message through the kingdom about, would you rather have this king in place that's gonna just let his own daughter be raped? You know, you should be very familiar with this one too. All these people are trying to come here and do is rape your women.
When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. They're not sending you. They're not sending you. They're sending people that have lots of problems, and they're bringing those problems with us. They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists.
So here he is, he turns the entire kingdom against me with this make Israel great again thing. And it was the beginning of his end.
But what? You didn't punish Amnon. You didn't punish Absalom. Why not? Why treat them gently?
I wasn't treating them gently, but how could I do it? How could I? I was guilty of the same thing. Same thing. Because here it is. Bathsheba becomes my wife over my wrongdoing. All because of my lust.
Oh, okay, but you haven't answered my question. Why wouldn't you just kill Absalom then?
How could I? It was my son. He just wanted power. And everybody wants power. Everybody. Everybody wants to be king. Everybody wants to be ruler. Until you're actually put in the position of power. Even your own president that you see elected, whatever. Even he just found out it's not that easy to be ruler. He thought it was easier to be a president.
I actually, this is more work than in my previous life. I thought it would be easier.
And he could drive his own car.
Yeah, I like to drive. I can't drive anymore.
He learned the important lesson of not riding his own mule. Maybe he'll still be alive.
Yeah, maybe he could have learned from you. You got some things right.
Some things. That's just the process of being a ruler. You got to get some things wrong before you get them right. It's part of leadership.
You had a pretty traumatic life. Did you ever feel that life wasn't worth living?
Whew. Too many times. Especially when I got older and I couldn't be kept warm anymore, but that's a different story. But you mentioned some of them. When Tamar was ravaged, when Amnon died, when Absalom died. But another time that really got to me was when the Amalekites took my wives. It's very difficult to explain what it's like to be separated from your family. The war with the Amalekites was a very violent one. It was rough. And when I was separated from my family, it kind of reminded me of your current events. Yeah, war is a very violent thing. And your country's and your nation's war on crime and war on drugs, it really affects the African American community.
He said, quote, "The Nixon campaign in 1968 and the Nixon White House after that had two enemies, the anti-war left and black people." You understand what I'm saying? We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or black. But by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did.
And they're separated from their families. How could I? How could I live with myself? I felt like I failed my family, but it was with a war that I had nothing to do with.
Now, there's about 1.2 million African American children with a parent who's incarcerated. That's about 1 in 9. The research shows the kids who experience parental incarceration have diminished school achievement, they have behavioural problems, depressive symptoms, acting out, and there's also evidence that these kinds of negative effects associated with parental incarceration are concentrated more among boys than among girls. And there's a very real risk here that incarceration becomes an inherited trait.
And here it is. You've got this war on crime taking African American males and African American women away from their families and leaving the families to fend for themselves on a welfare system that's ran by greedy corporations and a corrupted government.
Oh, so the more people that are in prison, the more money they make. Ooh, that's dirty.
Yep, that's why private prisons sneak occupancy clauses into their contracts, which actually require states to keep prisons full.
Last year, a private prison in Arizona didn't make their 97% capacity quota. So the state government had to pay them a $3 million fine.
Fines like that incentivize cash-strapped states to keep people in prison as long as possible.
What would you do differently? What would you do if you were a leader today? How would you stop the calamity?
Calamity? You haven't seen calamity yet. The worst thing that your people have going is amongst themselves and with your greatest ally.
Who, France? England? Canada? Australia?
No. Mother Earth.
But ecology wasn't an issue in your day, was it?
As a matter of fact, it was. Always been an issue. We'll go back to Absalom again. When my army had to fight his in the forest of Ephraim, the forest that day, you should be familiar with the story. The forest that day claimed more lives than sword alone. And I think in your world today, in your modern world, your massive deforestation and global warming will claim more lives than sword, than drone, and wars combined.
The United States will withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord.
That's depressing.
But it's real.
True. I mean, you've given me a lot to think about. Is there anything else you would do differently in our world today as a leader today?
Well, I am a leader in your world today. Why do you think you read these books? You just think they're just historical artifacts and dramatic reading? Our stories of old tell a lot about your stories of new.
Wow. Well, I guess thanks for being here, however that worked. You've given me a ton to think about, and I'm sure
that works. Doesn't your God work in mysterious ways?
He sure does.
He?
Or she.
She?
Or they. I guess if you're willing, I just have one more question. The Messiah came from your lineage, the Messiah, Jesus. So would you mind if I ask about him? I'm gonna get my Bible real quick. It's right here.